speaking to you on behalf of Larbert Baptist Church. The pastor has given me this honour to speak to you. I appreciate it, and I do so with the very real desire that what I say is helpful to you. I wonder if you can share with me my opinion of the Apostle Paul's first letter to the church in Corinth. And it's this: there are certain aspects to that letter which are, well, sad. I think that's true of his second letter also, but that's not my subject. It's that letter, the first letter of Paul to the Corinthians. There are so many aspects to the condition in the church in Corinth which must have been heartache to the apostle. There were divisions. There was a competitive attitude among the people as to which particular leader they would follow, whether it was Paul or Apollos or Cephas or Christ. I think there's an element of that still among Christian people. There was immaturity. There was carnal, worldly way of thinking. There were proud and erroneous estimations of the relativities of work one does in the church. There was immorality. There were impetuous ways of taking things to court. What a testimony that must have been. There were problems of the faith in marriage. There were tensions regarding food that had been offered to idols. There was opposition to the Apostle Paul's call by God to his authority and office. There was idolatry. There were misunderstandings regarding the complementary ministries of men and women, and beautiful complementary ways in which Christian men and Christian women serve and minister. There was gross distortion of the ordinance of communion. There were confusions over spiritual gifts. There was doubt even concerning the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And all these things the apostle is dealing with in that letter. And at the end of chapter 12, there's almost a sigh. I think it's a sigh. The apostle says, "And yet I show you a more excellent way." as I understand the New Testament Greek, what the apostle is saying is this: I want to show you something that God has called us to walk in, and it's a way of such excellence that the glory of it just throws over all horizons. There's nothing you've ever heard of that's so glorious as the way of faith. The apostle says it, I think, with a sigh. And then he launches into the 13th chapter of his letter to the Corinthians, a famous chapter. Perhaps you know it by heart. It's a chapter concerning love and the call of God to love and the glorious love of God. And the apostle, he opens it up to these Corinthians, and he opens it up to us. And he rises in verse after verse to that 12th verse of Romans 13. And this is what he says: for now we see in a glass dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know even as I am known. And the apostle contrasts now with then. Now, the present struggling, imperfect experience that all of us know, with then and the glory of God's full purpose revealed. Now, with its restrictions within the dimensions of space and time. Now, with its obscured perceptions. Now, with its variations of points of view, with one saying, well, I think this, and another saying, well, I think that. Now, with its gradual, slow accumulation of conviction concerning the mighty principles of truth. Now, with its disciplines of temperament. Now, with its scarring of many failures and its chastening with many regrets. Now, with its ongoing through the night, as it were. It's a continual struggle. Continual. But then with it's mortal, putting on immortality, as Paul says in this very letter in chapter 15. Then, with its freedom within and without the dimensions of space and time. Then, with its glorious seeing and its wonderful surprises, then with its concord, its agreement at the very pinnacle of profound thinking and realization of truth, then with its radiance of holiness within a context of eternal holiness without, then with its remedial consolations of God our Father wiping our tears away, then with a far spent night finished forever, and the dawning of eternal day. How different then will be from as it is now. It will be accurately thought through then, though it's so inadequately thought through now. Then will be the exhilaration of the soul, whereas now, so often, there is frustration in the soul. Then will be the experience of being prized by all, whereas now, how easily we forget. Then will be the absolute perfection, whereas now, so often, we make our way through a muddle of pathetic vanities and divisions and quarrels and frailties and misapprehensions and immaturities and exaggerations and intemperate indulgences and all the very rest of it. Don't we all know it? Now, we see through a glass dimly, but then face to face. Now, I know in part, but then I shall know fully, even as I'm known. You can feel the wistfulness of the apostle. He's got such a ministry to exercise. This is how he summed it up in his letter to the Romans, chapter 8, verse 29, when he says that God, for very love of us, has saved us by Jesus Christ his Son unto this consummation, that we, think of it, that we might be conformed to the image of his Son. There's such an inspiration in it. That's the future. That's what it will be then. And we're making our way slowly, very slowly. Well, that's how I feel, slowly. towards that wonderful destination. We shall be conformed to the image of his Son. That's not the elimination of individuality. It's the enhancement of individuality. Every believer, I mean every believer from the very dawn of time, within himself, herself, has some unique way of expressing the glory of God. Till all the other believers will prize that believer because of what that believer demonstrates in his life, her life, of the glory of God, of the image of the Son of God. There's something exhilarating about it. And so the Apostle ends that 13th chapter. Now, he says, abide, faith, hope, love. But the greatest of these is love. Oh, don't misunderstand this. Please don't misunderstand this. The Apostle is not giving grades to faith and hope and love. Faith, well, I give it 8. Hope, well, 7 3/4. Love, 10. It's not that at all. Don't misunderstand it. What the Apostle Paul is saying is this, that faith and hope are, as it were, the paths that lead to the destination of love. That's what he is saying. Faith and hope, these are the roads we must travel. Faith in Christ for the present, hope in Christ for the future. But the destination is love. Let me close by referring you to the book of the prophet Isaiah, chapter 35, verse 8. We read that God has provided a highway of holiness. That's what God has done. That's what God has called us to. A highway of holiness. But then, in verse 10, the ransomed of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with singing everlasting. Joy shall be upon their heads, and they shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. And what is the prophet saying? He's saying that with faith and hope, we walk in the highway of holiness, and we come to Zion, the city of God's love, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. Well, may God